I'm going to take you back to 1995, the year that I first started bartending. Now, back then, I didn't really like beer. I just did not have the palate for beer, whether it was bitter, whether it was lager, whether it was Guinness, whether it was those Irish cream ales. Do you remember those? Caffrey's, Kilkenny, all those kind of things. Wexford was another one. I just didn't have the palate for them. And I was searching for a drink that I could kind of go to. I did like the bean Cornish, obviously. I did like the occasional pint of cider as well, but that never really hit the spot. So I kind of stumbled across rum. I was taken aback by rum. Rum was fun. But it was also in a time where I drank too much Coca-Cola, too much ginger beer, those fizzy drinks. I absolutely adored them. But they were the mixers. It was rum and cokes. It was rum and ginger beer. You know, that's what I was drinking. However, if you're talking about neat spirits, I'll be honest, I didn't really have the palate for rum as a neat spirit at all. The same goes for whiskey, and I've still never got into whiskey some sort of 30 years later. You know, I couldn't handle that. Gin was definitely, you wouldn't drink gin neat anyway. Vodka, no. And then the only other one was tequila. And again, that really wasn't on my wavelength. So when it came to neat spirits, I just didn't have the palate. But not many people do when they're young. But there was always this intrigue around brandy. Hello, newfound brandy friends, here on my Black channel. This is dedicated 100% to brandy. We're going to cover brandy, cognac, armagnac, cocktails, Calvados, British stuff, US stuff, Australian stuff. This is going to be a journey for me in brandy. If you want to join me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But don't forget, you know, this is one of 6 channels. I've got 5 other channels. So if you're just finding me for brandy and you've never seen me talk about rum, then go and check out those links in the description below. Now, going back to the intrigue about brandy, that kind of stemmed from, I'll be honest, from Mummy Barman. She always used to have a bottle of brandy in the house, whether it was Cavazier, whether it was a Spanish brandy. She used to go through a lot of Spanish brandy back in those times. So I was always intrigued, but you know, it wasn't a neat spirit for me. You know, I couldn't handle neat spirits. And working in bars, working in pubs, it was a luxury. You know, we really only had, in the vast majority of bars that I worked at, we really only had 2 different brands. 9 times out of 10, it was Cavazier. And then the premium upgrade was like your Remy Martin, your VSOP. Now, back in those days, we didn't really have a budget for trying things. So you kind of had to pay for stuff. So I tried like various little bits of Cavazier VS, the bog standard one, but never ever got to try the sort of Remy Martin, the VSOP, because it was just too expensive back then. Now, for all you new school bartenders and, you know, people that just don't comprehend stock takes and things like that back in those days, you know, when your stock taker came in every month, they could tell you the volumes that you should have to the shot. If you were even a shot out on spirit, all hell would break loose, especially in managed houses, you know, that were part of chains and things like that. This was before cocktails really even kicked in, where you could use like 15 ml of something, 15 ml of that. Everything was done by the shot. So you kind of knew that you should have 27, 28, 13, 12 shots left in a bottle. So we couldn't even sneak a shot or anything like that. We would have to pay for it. So back then, the only way to really try stuff was to pay for it out of your own money. And I'll be honest, it didn't even really, we would get tips from time to time. It didn't even really dawn on me to kind of say, yeah, I'll have a shot, because it was so expensive. You did half a cider or like a single rum and coke or something like that. You would never dream of putting your tips or letting someone, a customer, buy you a shot of Remy Martin. You just wouldn't have thought about it. So I spent the first few years being truly intrigued, but never actually trying the good stuff. Now that was 95, 96, 97. I want to scrub forward to 1999. And I remember this, you know, as clear as day. This was a kind of a day, a morning lunchtime that kind of changed my drinking world forever, if you like. And that was the day Moët Hennessy came to town. Now Moët Hennessy, back in those days, these days it's called Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, LVMH. But Moët Hennessy did a tasting. They invited, I was quite lucky, I was one of 10 to 12 bartenders. They invited along to a bar, one of the cocktail bars in Cambridge. and I was invited along to taste the Hennessy range, and I was super, super excited. Not just purely to taste brandy and cognacs, but this was my first ever proper brand tasting. It's the first time I'd ever been invited to this. 4 years into bartending, I'd never experienced anything like this before. Now, I mean, at the time, I'd already done my sort of level 1, my entry WSET and that kind of thing, and then did the spirits thing. But again, it wasn't, when you do this thing, it's not dedicated to one type of spirits. It's an overall kind of thing. So you are, when you do your spirit educate, your WSET, back in those days, it was very much focused on whiskey, on rum, on brandy, on all that, and just a general broad spectrum overview. It wasn't a deep dive. Now, flash to the morning of the tasting, and the brand ambassador, I can never remember his name. Obviously, I've changed my day. His name doesn't stick. I can remember him. He had a beard, and he was kind of just a really lovely sort of middle-aged guy back then. So, you know, we've got to be talking probably mid-60s or so now. Whoever you are, thank you. But he started the day and he kind of guided us through the difference between brandy and cognac, which completely blew my mind because, again, as I say, you know, we'd had this bit of education, we'd had this bit of like knowledge come through the WSETs, but nothing as in depth as this. And then we went through that, and then he guided us through the tasting. We started off, and I've got a little bottle here ready for tastings that are going to come on this channel, but he guided us through the Hennessy VS. Now, I'll be brutally honest. I kind of did the polite thing. I was a polite child. I was brought up the right way, if you like. So I would always be grateful. I'd always be thankful. I kind of tasted it, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's really, really nice. Deep down inside me, I was just like, oh no, I don't like this. This is harsh. This is burny. This is, you know, this is just not. Where's the Coke? Give me brandy and Coke, or brandy and ginger, or something just to kind of wash it down. It just didn't sit well with me at all. Not like this does now. This is absolutely gorgeous and totally on my wavelength. But the next one we went to was the Hennessy VSOP. And again, what I could tell, it was, you know, it was basically, I'll be honest, it was less harsh. That I wouldn't say it tasted nice. It was just less harsh. You got to think, 1999, I was like 22 years old. Probably wasn't here. I was probably 21 at the time. But it was just less harsh. I was crying out for Coke, for ginger ale again, just something to kind of, you know, mellow it out. And I was kind of like a little bit disappointed, a little bit kind of, oh yeah, I thought I'd really like this. You know, Mum has it at home. I thought I thought it'd be there. I did love a brandy and Coke, a brandy and ginger, but I just couldn't get my head and my palate around these neat spirits. But it's at this moment that things changed, because the very next one that came out is the now defunct Hennessy Fin de Cognac. And I'll never forget the bottle. It's kind of like a mishmash of like Hein, for instance, Hein Cognac. I've not got a bottle even remotely close to it there. Very different to the other Hennessy bottles that were there. You know, it was just a standout bottle. And he poured it and we tasted it. And all of a sudden I was just, oh, that's rather nice. And again, there's no difference in ABV. I think these were all 40% ABV. No difference in sugar content or anything. This was kind of like a limited exclusive release, even though it ran for quite a few years. And it was just like, oh, obviously a bit more expensive than the VS and a bit more expensive than the VSOP. But all of a sudden, I've slightly comprehended that actually the better quality of spirits, the nicer and the more I appreciated them. So this Hennessy Fin de Cognac is the cognac that I truly attribute to changing my perception of spirits, because, you know, I won't forget it. It was just like, I think when I say I won't forget it, I'm pretty sure it was a blend of 4 to 10-year-old brandies. And obviously brandy isn't kind of done the same way as rum is does. So you'll never get a 4-year-old. They'll just class it as a VS or a VSOP or something like that. But the Fin de Cognac was the name. It was blended. So it was slightly better than the VSOP, but not as good as the XO. But I was just like, wow, this is super nice. Just neat on its own, in a brandy snifter. Just like I just fell in love with this. This was really, really tasty. And I got to the point where I cheekily asked, I was like, a little bit more, to the brand ambassador. I was like, oh, this is delicious. You know, it's like the shoulders went, finally, I had a spirit. Finally, I had something that I really enjoyed. But on asking for a little bit more, he went, hang fire, we've got 2 more to come. Now, me being me, I was kind of inquisitive because there was only one more on the table. And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, what's the second one coming? I'll come to that. Now, the very next cognac that came out, and again, I've got a small bottle here lined up for tastings, but the big bottle looks identical. It's the Hennessy XO. And oh my God, I mean, back then, I'll be honest, it was the bottle that I kind of saved up for a month for afterwards. You know, back then, 80, 85, I think it was just under, I think it was about 75 quid actually, back then. And it was just, that was like 2 or 3 months spare cash wages back in those days, you know. Didn't have the luxury of like dispensable income or disposable income. But I wanted that so bad. That was finally the neat spirit that I just absolutely adored. It was just so different to anything I tasted before. Now, to put that into perspective, 75 quid back then. I've looked at the price recently when I did the Master of Malt Advent calendar. We're talking like it's doubled the price, if not more expensive than that. You know, 140, 150, 160 quid. You know, what, 27, 28 years ago, that kind of thing, we're talking at 75 quid. And that was an absolute steal for me because I finally appreciated something that I could drink neat. Now, before I tell you what this last tasting was, I want to set the scene. And this will be relevant to bartenders. If there's any bartenders watching this, especially in the UK, but actually this could be relevant to a lot of you guys at home as well, because one thing I've realized over the years and working with different brands, different distributors, if LVMH are in town, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, if they're in town doing the tasting, you go, because they are still to this day the one distributor, the one agency, the one owner, whatever you want to call them, that do things properly to blow you away. I've been lucky enough, I've been fortunate enough to go to multiple tastings of them, from like their Moet champagne when they put on launch events for that. I've been to that. The big one for me that stands out was actually 10 Cane rum. The older rum generation will kind of remember that. It was Moet, I'm just going to call him Moet Hennessy. Moet Hennessy kind of had this grand idea to produce a premium white rum to compete with the likes of Havana 3-year-old and Bacardi and that sort of stuff. This 10 Cane was leaps and bounds ahead of its time. It was a phenomenal white rum. But in those days, premiumization really wasn't a massive deal. You know, if you could get Havana for 17 quid, why the hell would you pay £22 for 10 Cane? That was basically the theory. It didn't last long. But the launch party for that, they hired this big flash place in Mayfair. A real nice place. We had not just like magnums of 10 Cane. I'm sure it was Jeroboam's, like massive bottles of 10 Cane. They hired and paid Huey from the Fun Loving Criminals to DJ all night. And it was just a magnificent event. And that's just like a couple of brands. All the other brands, what's the vodka? Belvedere. They brought Belvedere. I've been to a Belvedere tasting where they completely blow you away. And I know I'm sidetracking a bit, but I really want to emphasize this point. When Moet Hennessy do things, they are the one brand that do things properly. Which brings me nicely on to that 5th cognac that we had at this tasting. I've set the scene. I really didn't know what it was at the time, but the brand ambassador pulled out this sort of secret bottle, and it was the Hennessy Paradis. Now, I want to say at that time it was about £1 a bottle, but it's not much more than £1 a bottle now. So 100 UK pounds, so what, 15, 16, $100 if you like. So I'm probably thinking it might have been about £600 to £700, like maybe $1,000 back then. But he was very kind and let all 12 of us bartenders try some of this, and it was just a phenomenal experience. Now, I've tasted, again, I've been lucky enough to go to other tastings where I've actually tried the Louis XIII, for instance. I've tried the Havana Maximo. Both the Louis XIII is what, £3,000 a bottle. The Maximo is about £1,000 a bottle, give or take, for a 500 CL. And even back when I was doing quite a lot of stuff with Pernod Ricard through Havana and all that, they did actually take me to Martell in Cognac, and they managed to try Martell XXO as well, which was, you know, not quite of it, not that expensive, but sort of £600 in there. I've tried some phenomenal liquids in my time. This Paradis just blew me away. So basically, this backstory kind of set the scene for me for the next few years. It did essentially 3 things for me. Firstly, it changed my perception of spirits and what I actually like forever. I mean, my love for cognac was well and truly born then. It really was. But you have to think back in those days, we still didn't have access to many brands. It was like really 3 or 4 brands if we were lucky to get it. But it's kind of where that love affair started, 1999. So the second thing that happened, as any bartender would do, or you should do, if a brand kind of invests in you, you support them. And you guys, the long-term viewers on my rum channels, will kind of know this. And there's a reason why, like the France cognacs are out here as well, because over the years, you know, with that Murray Hennessy thing, I, as a bartender, as a bar manager and a bar, not bar owner, but kind of a general manager, that sort of stuff, I was very loyal to Murray Hennessy. You know, I brought in Belvedere, I brought in the Hennessy's, you know, all their core ranges that they kind of stocked. I was just so thankful. So my loyalty was there over the time. You know, Maison Ferrand, Plantation have not paid me, but looked after me. So I'm very loyal to Plantation. I love the stuff, don't get me wrong, but again, it's a loyalty thing. And the same goes now with the Pierre Ferrand, and I will come on to that in a bit. But I am loyal. If someone invests in me, I will do, you know, I will big them up and I will champion them and I will work with them. But then the third thing that happened to me after that tasting kind of brought me down to earth with a great big thump, because as the general manager of the bar I was running at the time, I kind of invested in a few bottles of different Murray Hennessy's. The Finder Cognac, I didn't go up to the XOs or anything like that. It was the Finder Cognac, a couple of XOs and the VS's and all that. And I put together a cocktail menu that was not heavily influenced with cognac, but a decent amount of cognac cocktails on there. Seemed, as you can guess, not many people shared my love of cognac. And it just did not go down at all well. Basically, a grand total of 0 people shared my passion of my new found spirit cognac. No one really wanted. And without going into too many other stories, that is exactly how it's remained for the best part of 25 years. Cognac, brandy, is seen as this fuddy-duddy, posh, rich person's spirit. You can only drink it in front of a fireplace with a cigar and a smoking jacket or a velvet jacket. That is now what I want to change. Now, to bring this through to modern times, I still can't think of too many bars, unless I go to like 5-star hotel bars, where I could walk in London, where I could walk in and try different brandies, different cognacs. That is just not stocked. You are lucky if you go to the vast majority of bars and there are 2 brandies on offer. A nice expensive one and maybe the odd cheaper one for cocktails. And this is really what I want to get down to. I want to change this. I want to start a motion. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, why didn't you do this earlier? If this was truly your passion, why did you not do this earlier? And I'm not even talking in the last few years. I'm talking like in the last sort of 10, 15 years. Why didn't you go after it? The simple fact was, you know, social media wasn't what it was, or isn't what it is now, if you like. YouTube isn't what it certainly wasn't, isn't, you know, it's just not what it is these days. Even if I wanted to learn and invest and go in there, it would have been so hard, and it would have taken my own money, you know, money that I didn't have and time that I didn't have to kind of go down this rabbit hole. We are now in a world where we can kind of make businesses out of our passions. You couldn't do that really 10, 15 years ago. There was just no way of monetizing a passion back then. So I basically did what, you know, any normal sane person would do and just kind of forget about it. After all, I'm predominantly a cocktail bartender, and rum for me was that thing. Rum was always the fun cocktails. It was always the better cocktails. It was the cocktails that gathered attention. So I, as a cocktail bartender, I was happy with rum. It was never the neat spirit that I would drink. You know, brandy, cognac always trumped it, but rum, and for the career that I've had, really is the mainstay of that. So why now? Why, you know, why look at brandy, right? Why do this at all? Well, I want to take you back now to last year, 2023, June 2023. Again, this is where my loyalty, I've already touched on this. it was actually a plantation thing, but so plantation Maison Franc invited me out to Maison Franc in Cognac. Now, for those of you that don't know, it's where plantation headquarters are. They obviously don't distill rum there, but it's kind of where their aging houses are and their blending warehouses, whatever you want to call them. It's where plantation HQ is at Maison Franc, Pierre Franc Cognac. But obviously, the bulk of that time spent there was surrounded by cognac. And, you know, we went on the cognac tours. We went on the distillery tours of how cognac's made, you know, amongst the grapes and the vineyards and all that sort of stuff. You cannot be, you know, you can't go to Cognac for plantation rum and not get immersed in cognac. So my passion was reignited in a big, big way last June. And to the point where, you know, the three of us were just sitting around the campfire in the evenings, actually polishing off his Alexandra Gabriel's like prized possession. His I think it's called, what's it called? I forget what it's called now. But the 160-pound bottle of Pierre Franc cognac. So since then, I've kind of been steadily trying the odd little bit of cognac here and there. I've always got a bottle of brandy and cognac in the house, but never like expensive stuff, never proper stuff, because, you know, my business, my thing is rum. But now that is changing. And it got to the point where in December, the Master of Malt Advent calendar, where I tested the water with a lot of my rum audience to sort of see how open they would be to brandy and if there was any market for it. So that kind of tested the water. I had 7 in there, and it just got to that point where I was just like, do you know what? I've got to do this. This is my neat sipping spirit by a million miles. I absolutely adore this. And if truth be told, I would much rather, I've said it 2 or 3 times through this video, I would much rather grab a bottle of cognac in the evening, have a glass of this every night than I would do any rum that I've ever tasted. I love rum, I adore rum, but for a neat sipper in the evening, for me, there is not even a question in doubt, it is brandy. So here we are, January 2024, a rather long video to launch the channel. But I want to give you my story. I want to kind of set the scene. I want to kind of give you the background and realize and make you realize that I'm not just doing this on a whim. It's not just like, oh, brandy. I wanted for you guys to see my passion and what sparked this. So January 2024 is the launch of my brandy channel. How this is going to work, you would have seen the title of this channel. Here's the thing, I wanted to call it brandy. That ain't ever going to happen. You go into YouTube or Google and just search the word brandy. If you could get any bottles of brandy, you'll have done exceptionally well, because actually what comes up, go and search for it. You search for it. Some of you will know exactly what's coming up, but for a lot of you, just go and search and you'll see what comes up. So I couldn't call the channel brandy because it will never, ever get found. So I've called it Brandy Cognac Calvados, but I really want to drive home that this is a brandy channel because, and I will dive into this in the next video of what is brandy. I don't want to spoil too much. I don't want to get into any educational stuff here, but I want to, on this channel, we are going to feature anything and everything that would be classified as brandy. And that's not just grapes. Now the mission's going to roll in a few parts here, because while I'm passionate about brandy and cognac, my education level is minimal. I've never really spent the time over the last sort of 10 years or so, 15 years, learning it. So while I have got a little bit of loose knowledge, I'm treating this as an educational kind of journey for me as well. The bits I learned through the week, I'm going to be passing on to you guys as videos. There is a certain amount, as I say, I can give you the base education, which will be above a lot of entry level, but not even remotely close to being, you know, I know about brandy, not even remotely close to. This is an educational piece for me, so I can then educate you guys. I really want to take this opportunity to dispel the myth that brandy is for 60, 70-year-old blokes. Essentially, it is not. You know, Mummy Barman, for instance, is a classic example of this. She's been a brandy person for as long as I know. You know, it is very much a female spirit, is a male spirit. But it is also, and it's also a young person spirit as well. Do not think it's an old person spirit. It is not, it is a young person spirit. But do not think it is also a spirit that can only be drunk neat, because, oh my God, it makes some delicious cocktails. Very different cocktails to what you would make on my rum channels. Very different. You know, don't expect tiki cocktails or fruity cocktails or anything like that. Is very different. But when you start to make proper brandy cocktails, you will be transformed, because these are delicious. This almost, for me, goes into ego tender territory, but only because they are very different to tiki and tropical cocktails. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts. How is this going to play out? Well, essentially, look, I'm going to spend the first few weeks, I've got capacity to do 2 videos a week to start off with. I'm going to start off with a little bit of education. We'll cover the bare basics, not dive too in depth. You know, I haven't got the knowledge to dive too in depth. So I'm going to give you the bare basics, and then we'll start to mix that in with serves and cocktails. So the idea is you'll get 1 piece of educational content a week and 1 sort of cocktail recipe, cocktail, you know, tasting a week. That's the whole idea. So kind of see this as a cross between my blue rum channel and my red rum channel. The blue rum channel is neat tasting. The red rum channel is all about, you know, how to make those classic rum cocktails, if you like. So kind of see this as a mishmash of both of those. I don't think there's a separate audience like there is in Rum World. You know, I do think cognac or brandy and cocktails go hand in hand, to be fair, because I think the cocktails that you would make with brandy, with cognacs, actually aren't too far removed from those that enjoy brandy, cognac neat. It's very different to rum, as I say. The other thing to point out, as I've mentioned, I am going to be exceptionally loyal to a few brands here. Now, I've got these out. I don't know who Bernard Royal, I've just got that. It's just the Calvados brand that I've got here. But firstly, you know, for the cocktails, are certainly starting off, you know, Pierre Ferrand's cognacs are going to feature heavily. They're not paying me. This is not a paid video, a paid channel or anything, but it's a loyalty thing. As I've said, you know, whatever line of work you're in, it doesn't matter. If someone looks after you, if you're a plumber and, you know, I don't even know anything about plumbing, but, you know, one of your suppliers is really loyal to you, you're going to be loyal back to them. It's exactly the same as me. So I'm going to be super loyal. The cocktails I'm going to focus on are going to be with Pierre Ferrand. They are going to be the first sort of cognacs that I feature. But don't think it's just going to be Pierre Ferrand. I want to go on a journey myself, and I want to taste. You can already see lots of different samples here. You know, we're going to be going through all of the different cognacs, all the different brandies, tasting, because the one thing cognac does over rum is actually it's quite easy to get little samples without getting whole bottles, and they do lots of half bottles as well. So it's way more accessible to try the decent stuff. So we're going to try off on that before we go down the XO routes. And we've got Camus up there, Cavazier, Hennessy, Remy Martin XO, got Janu, got Don Fronte, Bernard. You know, I've got the other 2. What I tried in the advent calendar. We've got the Fine there. We've got the XO up there for Calvadoses. And the other one I'm going to bring out here is Seven Tails as well, because you know, Seven Tails is very different, and this is something I'm going to come on to. I'm not going to tell you too much about it now, but it's very different. It's a brandy, and it wants to be a cool brandy. It doesn't want to be classed as cognac or armagnac. It is definitely a brandy. But also, we've got brandies being distilled right here in the UK. Do not think it's a French thing. You know, the US have got their own brandies. We've got we've got Calvados in Normandy, in north of France. We've got apple brandy here in the UK. We've got Applejack in the US. They're all very similar kind of things. So we've got all those different things. But to start off with, the loyalty is going to be purely with Pierre Ferrand. But then we will eventually get on. I've mentioned Calvados. I've mentioned the cognac, armagnac, brandy. We will be getting on to other brandies as well. Piscos, Garappa, Slivovitz, plum brandy, for all of those in the know. As I say, anything brandy will get featured eventually on this channel. So yes, massively long intro video. This goes against everything that you should do on YouTube. The rest of the videos will be really short, and to get the viewing time, to get people, you know, here. I very much appreciate that not many people will be watching this far, but I wanted to set the scene. My story is out there now. I'm not ashamed of it. I love brandy. Brandy, cognac, armagnac, whatever you want to say, will always be my favourite neat sipping spirit. It'll always be a league above rum for me. And that's just how it is. That's not detracting anything from rum. I absolutely adore my rum. But as I've said, you know, rum for me is primarily cocktail ingredient. Brandy is my neat sipping spirit. So join me on this journey. If you're still watching, if you haven't done already, hit that subscribe button. Join me for videos. I think at this moment in time, they're going to drop Wednesdays and Sundays, usual time, 3 o'clock UK time. I don't know what that is around the world, but 3 o'clock UK time. Join me together. Let's make brandy cool in 2024 and beyond. Cheers.